y'all, Dixie here. Today I want to tell y'all what's in my food bag for my next hack now that I'm on the AIP diet. I've been on the autoimmune protocol, also known as the AIP diet, for a few months now. I had been wanting to try to eat cleaner in normal life, but especially on trail for a while now. But what finally gave me the push to go on and get started is I ended up with a positive ANA test result, which my doctor said indicates that I likely have an autoimmune disease. Now, they're not sure which one because I'm not really having a lot of symptoms, or at least symptoms that point specifically to one autoimmune disease. So they were kind of like, well, just wait till your symptoms get worse and then come back and see us, and that just doesn't work for me. So whatever it is, I would like to keep it at bay. And when I mentioned some autoimmune stuff going on with me in an earlier video, this sweet lady named Virginia McGill reached out to me, and she's a health coach. She's got Hashimoto's, so she's been doing the AIP diet for quite some time now and has seen amazing results in her health. And so she suggested it to me and has been kind enough to answer my questions. But the cherry on top is she's also a backpacker. So she was kind of able to point me in the right direction to get started with AIP compliant food for backpacking. For those of y'all who are not familiar with AIP and you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, well, I'm still new to it too, but it's basically an elimination diet where in the first phase you're eliminating things that can be inflammatory to your body, like soy, grains, dairy, seeds and nuts, nightshade vegetables, preservatives, processed sugars, etc. And in that elimination phase, which at the minimum you'd want it to be 4 weeks, I think I went 6 weeks before I ever tried to reintroduce anything. But in that time, you're allowing your body to kind of get rid of all of that bad stuff that causes inflammation in you, and you're letting your body heal. And then at whatever time period you decide you're ready to start trying reintroductions, then you slowly reintroduce things one at a time to see if your body tolerates them well. I should mention before I get into the specifics of my food that I have successfully reintroduced almonds and pecans. So if you see those in my food list, they are not AIP compliant, but they are a successful reintro for me, so I'm allowed to eat them again. But let's get started on the food. This is what a typical day of eating is gonna look like for me when I get out on my next backpacking trip. First things first, breakfast. Now normally I would like to cook something like oatmeal or cream of wheat or grits, but grains are out on the AIP diet, so thankfully Wild Zora makes grain-free cereal packets that are predominantly made out of tiger nuts. Tiger nuts are actually not a nut at all. It's a tuber, so they are AIP compliant, and I really appreciate that Wild Zora makes AIP compliant meals. A lot of backpacking food companies out there do not, so I hope that that's something that will pick up more with time if people are wanting to eat clean and better on trail. In addition to a cereal packet for breakfast, I'm gonna have a baby food pouch that's got fruits and vegetables. It's surprising how hard it can be to find baby food without preservatives, but thankfully I was able to find some at a Sprouts store when I was out of town. Unfortunately, I don't have one nearby, but I'm pretty sure you can probably order these online, or you can at least find some online that are AIP compliant. But always, always, always check the ingredients because you'll be surprised at the stuff they'll sneak in there. For some additional protein, I've got some Wild Zora meat and veggie bars, and they did not sound too appetizing when I ordered them, but I broke some out and tested them, and they're actually pretty dang good. And finally, to top it all off for breakfast, in place of coffee, because unfortunately coffee beans are not AIP compliant, I'm gonna have some Wild Zora instant soup packets. You just heat up a cup of water, toss it in there, and even though it doesn't have caffeine and it's not gonna taste like coffee, it's at least something warm to sip on in the morning, and I think it'll do just fine. For lunch, I know a lot of backpackers like to slather some peanut butter on tortilla, but tortilla is not compliant, so I've got coconut wraps, and they take a little bit of getting used to texture-wise for some people. I think they're pretty good, and they do well as a substitute functionally for a tortilla. So I'm gonna have a coconut wrap with almond butter and honey. And again, that almond butter is a reintro. In addition to my peanut butter / honey wrap, I'm also gonna have a packet of tuna that comes in olive oil, and it's the Evu brand, EVOO. I like this brand because they don't sneak in any soy on you. A lot of times canned tuna or even tuna packets will have soy in there, and I just don't understand why that stuff's added in. For dinner, I'm gonna be alternating between the 2 AIP compliant meals that Wild Zora has, and that's Summit Savory Chicken and Mountain Beef Stew. I hope eventually there will be more options. I can see on a longer hike how these could get kind of boring and you could be really just sick of eating the same thing over and over. But I am grateful that they exist, and again, hopefully there will be more options in the future. And to add some calories to my dinner, I've got some olive oil packets, so I'll pour one of those in each of my dinners. For dessert, I made some pumpkin pie bark from a recipe off of backpackingchef.com. I made some of this stuff when I was starting the AT to take out on trail with me, and I really loved it, but I got kind of lazy with the other trails, and I don't think I ever made anything like this. But I just wanted to treat myself a little bit, and when you can find an AIP compliant dessert, it kind of feels like you're having a cheat day or something. But the only ingredients in this pumpkin pie bark are canned pumpkin, which the only ingredient in that was just pumpkin, real maple syrup, and some cinnamon. And you just mix it all together and dehydrate it. And then when you're out on trail to rehydrate, you just warm up a little bit of water, add in the pumpkin bark, and garnish with nuts if you prefer. If you're interested in making any of this or checking out all of the awesome recipes at backpackingchef.com, I'll put a link to this particular recipe in the video description. And now snacks. It can be tough to find jerky or summer sausage, etc., that is AIP compliant, but thankfully the Chomps brand, specifically the Italian beef sticks, are compliant, so I was excited about that. I will also have some additional Wild Zora meat and veggie bars aside from the ones for breakfast to snack on throughout the day. I found some individual packets of green olives that only have green olives as the ingredient. Packaroons made by Heather's Choice. They've got different flavors. You've got to check and make sure the ones that you select are AIP compliant if you're going to do the AIP diet, but they do have several options on there, and they are absolutely delicious. Again, this is another one of those snacks that feels like you must be cheating on your diet. Paleo puffs, air-dried fruit, and I also made some sweet potato chips at home that have coconut oil, salt, and rosemary. I think the chips didn't turn out quite as crunchy as I would like them to be. I read that if you use a mandolin to slice them real thin, that they turn out more crunchy, but I used the thinnest setting on the mandolin that I had, but maybe they make ones now that you can get even thinner. But they'll work for this trip and they taste fine. I just would prefer them to be crunchier. So those are the actual food items, and I think my favorite part about all of this is that I'm going to go on a backpacking trip without eating a single preservative, and I can honestly say that I have never before done that in my life, and I was a little concerned when I started this diet how it would translate to the world of backpacking, but where there's a will, there's a way. Once I got all of my food compiled, I decided to do a little breakdown of my calories and macros just so I had an idea of exactly what I was eating. Each day, if I eat all of the food that I have allotted for that day, then I should end up with just over 2,400 calories. Now, if I was on a thru hike, I would probably want that number to eventually be higher once I got in there and started cranking out the miles and my body was becoming a machine like all thru hikers experience. But for just a 3 to 4 day trip, I'm not really stressing over managing my weight, etc. So I think that that's a pretty good number. As far as macros go, this particular food plan ends up being 17% protein, 30% carbs, and 53% fat. Now, as you can probably tell, the AIP diet is not a low-carb diet. you're more focused on eliminating things that cause inflammation and feeding your body very nutrient-dense foods to heal it. But with that said, in normal day-to-day life, I don't typically eat as many carbs as I'll be eating out on trail. And in the future, I'd like to experiment a little bit with lower carbs than what I've got going on this trip. But I just wanted to know that this was even possible for my first round. I didn't want to stress over it too much, so this is what I threw together and what my end result is. And actually, I'll be a little bit higher in carbs considering the pumpkin pie dessert and the sweet potato chips. But again, this is something that I can dial in more going forward. Now, one trade-off for this particular food loadout compared to something I would have previously taken with me on trail is that it's more expensive. My Wild Zora dinners for 3 nights, for example, are $40 total, whereas on the AT, if I had eaten pasta sides for 3 nights, then that would be $3. So $40 versus $3 is definitely a big difference. But there are definitely ways to curb the cost of a healthier or cleaner diet on trail, and one of those is to dehydrate your own stuff. And I did dehydrate my pumpkin pie bark, but I could have done more. I just wanted to keep things simple. But I'm always looking for a deal, a way to save money. In fact, my dehydrator that I use, I got on clearance 80% off when I was working at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Something that would really help a lot with creativity of foods on trail would be a freeze dryer. So if you're cooking dinner and you've got some extra stuff left over, you can throw it in the freeze dryer and then have that fancy meal out on trail. But the price tags on the freeze dryers tend to be a little bit hefty. But I guess eventually it may pay off if I'm continuing to make backpacking meals for myself because I get tired of the 2 that Wild Zora has. Being on a restrictive diet can be quite alienating, but thankfully, with social media, even though there are pros and cons to it, and with technology, there are groups of folks out there who are doing this all the time and are willing to answer questions, etc. And I am so very grateful to Virginia for reaching out to me and suggesting AIP and then being willing to help me out with it, especially because she's also a backpacker. So if you're interested in learning more about AIP or paleo, eating clean, etc., I'm going to put some links in the video description. First, one to an AIP support group that Virginia recommended to me, and then also I'm going to link to her Facebook group and website. So if you want to learn more, then those are great resources. All right, y'all, well, that is all I have for you today. I will definitely let you know how this new menu works out for me. If you have any questions about AIP or AIP with backpacking, I'll do my best to answer those, at least from my perspective and experience, and especially if you're somebody who follows the autoimmune protocol and you are a backpacker, I would love to hear your comments and suggestions. Thank y'all so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe before you go, and we will see y'all next time.